Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Really excited for our conversation today. My name is Tyler Allen, manager for Marketplace Channel Sales, and super excited to honestly have our first Ask the Marketplace Experts webinar. We're looking forward to hosting numerous sessions. We're looking to build all types of content, would love feedback or thoughts on what you may be looking to have. But one of our first panel discussions and really first kind of topics we wanted to cover was asset tracking. There's so many different areas and so many topics, and honestly, so much misinformation sometimes of like what they are, what they aren't, and how customers are utilizing asset tracking devices through the marketplace to really make their fleets efficient and effective overall. So I'm super excited today to be joined by a few panelists. I've got Daniel Paris, who works on my team here at Geotab. He is the Marketplace Channel Sales Manager who actually manages our asset tracking categories. We've got Dallas Owens, the VP of Operations at Blue Arrow, who's going to be chatting through his experience working with Digital Matter. And then also Jennifer Halstead, President and COO of Link Labs. So two great perspectives to really add some discussion, some experience. And really the goal is to be as high level as possible, not to be tech, not to be confusing. But if there are questions, please put them in the chat as we get through the call and have a portion towards the end. We'd love to answer questions that we can for our panelists. So with that, if I can do a quick introduction here, so our panelists can have a chance to chat, have a chance to introduce themselves and kind of get them going. But I'm going to start with you, Jennifer, in regards just to kind of giving us a brief overview of your experience in the asset tracking space. What kind of assets do you typically see being tracked? And what are some of the most common challenges that you've helped businesses with recently? Let's see here. Might be having a quick tech issue. I don't see Dallas or them on the stream. There we go. I see Jennifer now.
All right. Thanks. Thanks for fixing that, Tyler. Thanks for having me. I'm the president of Link Labs, and I've worked with the company since 2019 in this asset tracking space. Link Labs is the leading expert in IoT technology and taking that technology and using it to commercialize for both indoor and outdoor asset tracking. We started in the indoor asset tracking space in 2014, and that's important because accurate indoor tracking is really hard. We had to solve a whole lot of technical problems to make that technology affordable and accessible for businesses of all sizes. We expanded our expertise in tracking to include the outdoor tracking in 2020, really opening up that visibility for customers wherever their assets might be, using and improving a combination of technologies. I kind of like to think of it as democratizing asset tracking. We've utilized Bluetooth, GPS, cellular, Wi-Fi, and ultra-wideband to provide exactly that level of accuracy that customers need where they need it. When I think about kinds of assets, the obvious ones are high value assets. Things valued over $5,000 are pretty easy to get an ROI with GPS trackers. But when you combine these technologies, we're seeing companies move to tracking smaller assets that might not be so expensive themselves, but they may have value because they're important for process or providing better customer service. So we're starting to see this market space open up with things like tools, construction equipment, and medical equipment. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that as we start moving forward. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And for sure, I want to get into that, I think, as we see, because that's, to me, the biggest kind of, I'd say misnomer, but maybe miseducation is you think tracking device. I think trailer tracking is always what comes up, but there are so many other use cases. And I'm always curious to find, ATM tracking, porta potty tracking, devices for, airplanes and equipment and all types of things. So to me, that's one of the biggest things I want to kind of go through today is really kind of help educate all of these new things that can be covered way beyond just, a trailer or device. So Dallas, I think we've got you in here now. Fantastic. Honestly, kind of the same question to you, if you would, just a brief overview of your experience in the space. What are some of the assets you see most commonly tracked? And then, if there's any challenges you've seen some businesses have that you've been able to help overcome.
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say that, of course, I guess I'll do a quick introduction with Blue Arrow, and Blue Arrow manages the digital matter asset tracking devices in the Geotab Marketplace. And I would say that really my experience has been an evolving experience for the last 5+ years, and asset tracking has changed quite a bit. 5 to 10 years ago was really about, I just want to track where my asset is once a day or every 3 days, or some, really basic needs. And what we've seen, and I think it's the exact same as Jennifer and the Link Labs team, is that's gotten much more complicated over the last couple of years of what people actually want to get out of tracking non-vehicle assets. And so that's really the trend. They want sensor data, they want more frequent tracking, they want all of their systems to work together. So I think 5-10 years ago, a lot of people would be tracking vehicles and Geotab, maybe assets somewhere else. And we're seeing a huge push over the last 5 years to have it all in one ecosystem working together. So that's been a huge trend that we've seen, at least. And I would say one of the common challenges people have that is, especially in terms of finding the right asset tracking device, is really being able to compare the different vendors that they're looking at on an apples to apples basis. So what we have found is that there is a lot of great partners in the space and a lot of not so great partners in the space. And a lot of times at face value, if you look at just a spec sheet or maybe a marketing slick, those devices can maybe look similar at a high level. But when you actually really dig into what the solution can do, what experience does the actual partner that you're looking at have, and some common pitfalls to try to avoid when selecting the right partner, those things are really, really critical, because these things can be a large investment depending on how large the fleet and asset base that you're tracking. And so making sure that you choose the right solution for your specific use case is really important. And that's honestly one of the biggest challenges there is just making the right selection and partner. So I'll leave it there.
No, I think that's great feedback. And one kind of towards the end of the call, I do want to make sure we communicate is, the proper needs analysis, the proper education, just to make sure you're getting the right one. That's where our marketplace team is here to help. That's what we manage. And of course, I know for both of you, that's what we want to review with the customer to make sure they know what they're getting. It's covering all the assets, because, I know you and I talked, Dallas, on a couple of situations of they bought the wrong one, right? They bought a product that wasn't the right one. It didn't have the battery life it needed. It didn't have the ping rate it needed. Then there's frustration. And so making sure we, of course, sell the right product to the right customer, to me, is a key one to it.
Now, Jennifer, to help the attendees on the call better understand, for a new fleet that's just understanding this new asset tracking technology, what would you say to them as they're looking to better understand the potential for this technology that might get them over the hurdle of trying to determine whether or not it's a good investment for them?
So I'm going to take a little bit of a different, almost an opposite take on this one, because really you need to understand what type of technology you're implementing and then what those limitations are. And sometimes we're a little bit scared of talking about what the actual limitations are. We'll talk about value, we'll talk about ROI, and those are absolutely critical. But there's so many different technologies in this space, and they work differently. And so you need to be talking to your partners about, what type of technology is this? How does it work? What are the limitations? Every type of technology has limitations. And knowing what those limitations are can help you mitigate them where needed or adjust processes around those limitations. So think about things like cellular connectivity and what that backhaul looks like. Examples might be Bluetooth connection or temperature ranges. And so having those honest conversations can set your expectations, but also really help the customer set their expectations of how the system is going to work. Sometimes you actually intentionally choose those limitations to achieve a stronger ROI, to drive down your costs and get a better return on your system. But some systems have hidden cellular costs, batteries, battery replacements, installations, or implementation challenges. And so when you're thinking about how to get started, you really want to look for a system that's going to have configurability, scalability, and simplicity.
Very helpful. Very good info. I don't know if there's anything different, Dallas, or...
Yeah, I would add just one thing. I think those are all very valid points, and I would couldn't have said it better myself. The one thing I would add to that would be is when you're trying to get over that hurdle is this a good investment? Am I going to get a return for this investment? Because, by the way, that's really the only thing you should be thinking about, or at least the main thing you should be thinking about when implementing these solutions, is you should be asking the vendor some questions. So I would say that a lot of times we get folks that come to us, and I would say probably most asset tracking partners have this, where they would say, hey, we're trying to protect from theft, which is, of course, a very common use case, if not the most common. But the question you should be asking is, what else can I get from this? Where else will I see a return on this investment? Because theft protection, when we do have theft and are able to recover a high value asset, of course, that's an easy one to connect the dots on. We recovered a $200,000 piece of equipment or whatever it may be, but there's a lot of other additional value. And so when you're trying to understand the technology better, what are the capabilities of that particular partner you're speaking to, but also just asking them and seeing, by the way, what sort of expertise they have, because you're going to be going into a partnership with them. You need to make sure they actually understand asset tracking, they understand fleet operations, they understand the challenges that fleets face today. And so they should be talking about things like not just theft recovery, but how do we make our fleet more efficient and effective in the field? How do we make sure that assets are actually at job sites when they should be? How do we understand things like right sizing our fleet, through the understanding of the utilization of our assets? So one of the big things that we talk about, and I'm sure Jennifer talks about, is especially the larger the fleet, although this can be true in any size, is do the assets that you have today, that you own, whatever it is, on your balance sheet, do you need all of those assets or not, right? Or maybe do you need more? And so we look at things like how often are these assets being utilized over a month, over a quarter, over an entire year. And I would say typically we're able to identify a lot of assets that can really be sold, taken off the company's balance sheet, and they can really rent that equipment when they need it. We find a lot of folks hold specialty equipment on their balance sheet that is needed for one job a year. That's very readily available to rent, and it makes much more sense for them to do so in that situation. So that's not always the case, of course, but just asking the partner you're evaluating, hey, I came to you for theft recovery. That's a huge concern for me. I'm in an industry or a geographic region that's really important because we're having lots of theft or lots of loss of equipment. But what else am I going to get out of it? Is an effect of what the devices can do. So there's only but so much you can get out of a device pinging once a day, sometimes. But if devices are tracking on motion or giving you geofence alerts or giving you other, more robust sensor data or something like that, the value proposition of what that solution can do can really expand outside of just maybe the initial reason why you're looking at this technology. And so I would just say, open up your mind a bit and look for ways to extract value out of the solution, especially if you're a heavy promoter internal to your business where you're having to make a case to an executive board who's ultimately making the decision. You have to really make sure that you present a really good return on investment synopsis. But I would leverage the partner you're working with to help with that study to actually make sure that you and your partner together are coming up with, hey, here's what we can expect to see from return on investment, or at least here's the areas that we've had customers have successes with this technology. That's very vague, but I think just getting out of theft recovery, which of course is a massive piece of this, is going to be really key to making this a smart financial decision for companies with non-vehicle assets.
Yeah, that's very helpful because I think, that's what we most likely think of is just, I don't want my stuff to get stolen, and when it does, I want to find it. But through today's chat and what you just mentioned, there's so many use cases and so many different ways. And then that layers on the ROI because now it's doing all these other things that I didn't know it could do. And it's fully integrated into my Geotab, and I can see it all. And I know in one map where all my stuff is, where it's not, and all that. So very helpful. We're going to take a quick poll question. Assuming that our poll is working properly, there should be an opportunity for everybody to basically just try to answer some of these questions. We got 2 or 3 polls during our chat today. And great, we already have perfectly even distributed answers so far. So the question was, again, which of the following is your biggest challenges when it comes to understanding or implementing your asset tracking technology? Whether that's identifying your risk, ROI, the technical complexities and integration, a lot of the data, what do I do with it, and making sure my team wants to do it, actually can gain buy-in. Let's see here. I'm not sure who's going to win out. It really is a pretty evenly dispersed poll. I'll give it just a couple more seconds as everybody's answering here. Definitely looks like understanding the ROI and technical complexities are leading 2 factors. So I think to what Dallas just spoke on, making sure when you're chatting with a partner, like either of these 2 on the call, like to really understand this is what I need, this is what I need the pain point to solve, and then is that investment going to be worth it? Because I know I've seen that discussion for numerous times where I need to protect my device that's $50. Well, that radio may not. So there may be a personal cutoff of the device equipment, and if it's under a threshold, it may not be worthwhile. And then the technical complexities and integration for sure is one to show and ask, and one that can be a really good demo, just so you can see all the stuff within, again, MyG and all integrated with Geotab stuff. So excellent. Great feedback, great answers. I'm going to keep us moving along here. All right, so I'm going to stay with you, Dallas, and kind of basically the value proposition. So beyond just simply knowing the asset's location, what are some of the other, less obvious but highly impactful benefits you've seen from implementing this? I don't know if there's any curious situations or really just ones that are beyond that average stuff that you could share.
Yeah, I guess I kind of jumped ahead and already answered this, so I apologize for jumping ahead of question, but I'll add a couple anecdotes to this. So I would say that, and I'll actually lean into the theft stuff, although I just said to get off that my last answer, so I'll contradict myself a bit. But I would say one of the things that we're constantly running into that's less obvious is the balance of when to use an OEM embedded solution on an asset and a third-party device. As everyone on this call knows, I'm sure, you know that OEMs a lot of times in the heavy, at least in the heavy equipment space, so think John Deere, Caterpillar, etc., they have their own OEM embedded services that provide some great data. And of course, Geotab already integrates with those OEMs. There's a lot of value there. But from a theft recovery perspective, there's challenges with that. And I've mentioned this before on previous discussions, but the biggest challenge is, we'll take any of those really, is that they have external antennas that are actually giving latitude, longitude for location data. And the challenge with this is, especially with an OEM embedded solution, is there's a lot of value there. But when you get to the theft situation, thieves, they understand those pieces of equipment because how those OEM solutions are installed are very consistent across all the different makes and models they have deployed in the field. And they know where to go to cut that antenna. And so the problem with this is, take an excavator, take a dozer, take a skid steer, whatever you want to look at. When those assets are stolen, thieves, in overwhelmingly large percentage of the time, they know they can cut that antenna, they can steal the equipment, and it's actually worse than ripping off a GPS device in the first place, because from the users or the owner of that equipment's perspective, they actually still see that piece of equipment communicating back. And the limitation of the systems is it'll continually send the last latitude, longitude that the GPS device sent. And so that device looks like it's still in your yard, still on the job site, whatever it is. And yet it's 1,000 miles down the road. It's at a port somewhere. It's crossed our southern border. I mean, there's a million different places this could have gone at this point. And so we've seen more and more folks wanting to put like a battery powered tracking device on these assets as well, because they're very high value. To use Jennifer's metric of a $5,000 asset, that's right in the range of what we talk about as well from like a baseline perspective. But these assets are typically hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not even more. And so there is an easy ROI to show of putting a more simple battery powered device that can be hidden. It doesn't need to be on top, where it can be easily found. It can be hidden. And it allows them to actually recover those assets in those situations. And on the flip side of that, the other advantage of that is with the OEM integrations, there's limitations to how frequent that data flows into Geotab. and that doesn't meet everybody's specs of how much they need location updates inside of Geotab. And so they can even get more frequent tracking with a third-party device. So it seems redundant to have two devices, but sometimes that redundancy is really important, and that's actually a huge value to the customer. So that would be one random example I would give. And on the flip side, kind of understanding the same use case where we had a customer that had Go devices in a vehicle, but theft was a major concern for them. And again, everyone on this call knows that people know how to find an OBD device a lot of times. And so putting what we call a sleeper device in those high value assets, so when that theft event occurs, the Go device almost is like a dummy device in a way, although it's still giving them all the value that Geotab gives, engine data, accelerometer, driver behavior. You now have a secondary device to help locate those high value assets. So it's thinking outside the box. And I would wrap this up by saying, I used to think I kind of knew all the use cases that you could come across, but the one thing to understand about asset tracking is it is overwhelmingly more diverse in terms of the types of assets that you can track versus vehicles. And that just creates all sorts of interesting opportunities to solve folks' problems with all the assets they have deployed in their, in their fleet. So anyways, hope that helps.
No, very helpful. And I wasn't sure if I was going to ping pong back and forth with these, but I think I will. But Jennifer, I'd love to, again, if you've got any context or stories of just beyond just that typical, I know where the vehicle is or whatnot. Is there any other less obvious use cases that you've seen that's been helpful for fleets?
Yeah, I mean, just to piggyback on what Dallas was saying, it's, in that theft and loss case, we are seeing more redundancy because he's exactly right. We have been talking to customers and private investigators around, zero recovery on assets that have devices already in them because the thieves know and they rip them out. And so having a battery-powered, inexpensive device that you're able to control when there's a theft loss use case is really helping customers recover their assets. When you think about some of those less obvious ones, looking for those revenue generating opportunities. So things like detention monitoring and billing or usage billing on rented equipment. If you're able to track where that rented equipment is, when it's being used, think about those opportunities that give you potential sources for additional revenue, even with the downstream customer or something that you can start adding as a service for your customers. And I think we're seeing more and more of those opportunities pop up and, around the utilization and the different types of data that you can get from these sensors.
Yeah, I'll add one thing, Tyler, if you don't mind me jump back in. I'm so glad Jennifer brought that rev gen opportunity because we actually just ran into this with a reseller partner who we were involved with within the customer. And the situation was very similar to that. It was a rental company and they were renting out trailers. And the problem they were having was that they would pre-bill customers on an average miles that they would see across all of their rental situations. And the problem with that is that they would rent out on an average and then have to come back and either credit back because they were using less miles in that trailer than expected, or they have to come and bill more. So it just created this really kind of not perfect customer experience. And so not only are they more accurately billing based on actual mileage that their customers are using for their equipment on the rental period, but it also creates a much better customer experience. So you have higher customer retention. They're having a lot better experience with you than the other person they may have rented from, down the road or in another part of their business. And so it can also create customer loyalty, and not every situation, of course, but in certain situations and use case, it just allows you to do some unique things that are not just, hey, where's my stuff at right now? So I just want to throw that in there as well.
Yeah, thank you, Dallas.
Okay, next question I'll ask to Dallas as you just finished speaking. Can you share an example of a specific scenario where asset tracking provided a critical advantage or saved the company significant resources?
Yeah, so I'll give you one that is completely not theft, since I've already kind of harped on that a couple times now. And this would be much more about being productive in the field. So, of course, a large customer base of any asset tracking company is going to be in the vocational space. So construction, especially heavy construction, with lots of assets deployed. So I've got one that comes to memory. We were working with the customer, And their problem was, hey, we don't lose things to theft. We every now and then we might, but it's not a big concern for us. But we are constantly having the problem of guys or our employees showing up to a job site to do a specific job, and the equipment that they need is not there. And so now you have employees on a job site being paid, because by the way, if they're there, they're being paid, and now they can't even do the job. So this leads to several downstream things. Number one, you have just higher costs, because now you're going to be delayed on that job. You're going to have more labor hours to complete that job. You now have someone else potentially trying to find the equipment, driving to different job sites, driving back to the office, making phone calls. They're trying to find out where this equipment actually is. Is it even available, by the way, or was there some sort of a miscommunication where that equipment's on another job site actually being used? So now you might have to rent equipment. So there's all these different things to think about. And the last piece of that is customer satisfaction, because anyone in here that's ever done like work on their home or anything else know that construction projects can be frustrating from a timeline perspective. And so this customer was very concerned with telling customers, hey, we can do this job in this time frame. And of course, there's going to be a little variance. But what they were trying to remove is these types of situations that would unexpectedly delay jobs further than they need to be, because they would get these jobs on recurring relationships and partnerships that would, refer them out to bid on jobs. And so being able to show up, actually do the job in a timely manner was really critical for them. So it was purely just an efficiency and productivity play for them. It had nothing to do with theft of equipment. It was just the actual loss internally of where that equipment actually is. And so that's one kind of a critical advantage. And then when you have those sorts of tools in place, you can now effectively bid on jobs better, because you have the tools in place, that you don't have all these unexpected downtime type situations. And you can either be more profitable or bid on jobs at a more competitive rate, because you know that you're more efficient than the next guy that's also bidding on the job down the road. And so that's a great example, I would say, of giving them a really good advantage in their space.
I think those are great examples of how powerful asset tracking could be for asset utilization, for sure. Jennifer, do you have any examples on your side that you can share with us based on your experience with Link Labs?
Yeah, so we work with a utility company, and they use asset tracking to not only locate, which warehouse things are at and where in the warehouse is it, so that they've got the right type of meters, where they need those meters to be able to deliver them for customers. But they've also used the system for proof of delivery of meters to be able to automate their billing processes. So as we talked about, like looking for those revenue generating opportunities, they're using it to automate the process around, okay, we installed this meter, and so now we're immediately billing the customer. And while you might think that that's fairly straightforward, what was happening in reality is paperwork wasn't getting completed, and customers were going months without being billed for their gas. And so the company had a policy, we don't go back more than 90 days. And so they were losing a lot of money on lost gas billings. And then, they were able to increase their customer service significantly, because no one wants to get a bill that's past dated for 90 days and all of a sudden you have an unplanned expense. So, really, like Dallas said, thinking about these opportunities where there's such an advantage to the soft cost of customer service and how that can really improve what you're providing for your customers and your relationship and your retention of your customers.
Excellent. Thank you, Jennifer. All right, I think we are going to go to our second poll for the group, just trying to get a little bit of insight on where we're at today. So this poll is, beyond basic location tracking, which of these benefits for asset tracking seem to be the most impactful for your fleet? So whether that's asset utilization and efficiency, security and theft prevention, which we've talked multiple times today, reducing those operational costs like fuel and maintenance, better compliance and reporting, or some of the streamlined inventory management, kind of like you just spoke about, where I can actually know where my stuff is and I can see in the warehouse where it is, or my people, or whatever I might be tracking. Let's see, I don't know if this guy's popping up as much. I don't see my stats. There we go. Takes a second. I feel like a game show host when I see the numbers kind of moving. It feels fun. It's exciting to see. which ones it's going to be at as people fills in. All right. So far, early gains and really just operational costs, better compliance and reporting seem to be leaders of the pack. Right now, a tie on the asset utilization. Oh, asset utilization, take it back. It's taking the king now. We got a couple more. It's like a horse race. Excellent. Yeah. About final ones. Okay, really honestly, take all that back. Improved asset utilization efficiency really seems to be the most popular, which I would imagine. I need to know where the stuff is. I want to be efficient with my tools. I want to be efficient with all my equipment. Clearly, that's one of the most prominent pain points, but it's curious to see some of the other ones equally important.
Well, and that's really the too, Tyler, that drives the customer satisfaction that we were talking about with those use cases. So makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, and it's almost kind of one of those, like, there's no dumb question. So, I mean, there's so many weird use cases that you kind of go, yeah, that could work for that. And so that's where, I'm trying, hopefully through today and future discussions with you guys, is trying to help educate that with customers. Of, you tell us what the problem is, and let's see which one, what solution might work for you. So, Jennifer, I'm going to swing one right back at you then. So really for a company that's just beginning to explore asset tracking, they're in the early stages, maybe it's post this call, what are some of the key factors they really should consider when choosing a solution? Battery life, I know, and ping rate is about as limited that my brain knows. Is there common pitfalls that they need to avoid to make sure, they're not buying the wrong product for their fleet?
We touched on it before, but I really think scalable solution, multiple technologies, multiple capabilities, configurability over time as your needs change, and they will, is the system built to scale with you? And I think that's something that, you really need to take into consideration as you're starting to explore asset tracking.
No, so, I mean, really just making sure, like, if I need 1 versus 1,000, that there's a simple way to scale it within my fleet. That would be.
Yes, but use cases too, right? Because what I'm trying to solve right now, the next thing is going to come up, a couple months from now or at the end of the year. And so do I have a technology and a system that's going to scale with me and for me? I think that's one of the reasons why, the Geotab integration is so important is, you've got visibility into everything all together. And as, you might be looking at one type of asset today for a theft and loss, recovery, but I want to then get utilization, or I want to get temperature sensing, or I need to know where this is in my warehouse. Like, those needs are going to continue to evolve, and you want something that's going to be able to grow and scale with you, not only from an initial implementation piece, and you were touching on that, Tyler, what's the complexity of getting this installed, and how often do I have to replace my batteries, and when can I change my configurations and my geofences and, all of that, but also, the long-term scalability as you add more complexity and more opportunities within your business.
No, excellent. Dallas, anything else from your side? Any of the common pitfalls or some of those key factors?
Yeah, I'll just make one comment on that poll first. I think it's very not shocking because, of course, the businesses that we work with are very, they're asset heavy, right? So how you allocate capital is extremely important for not only fleet managers, but CFOs and executive teams. So they're always looking at, are we getting a return on this piece of equipment in our fleet, right? They're very concerned with where they can allocate capital and the most efficient and effective ways to do so. And so that's that's the least shocking thing I've seen all day was how that poll was answered. It's really, really important. And I would say there's a couple pitfalls that we seem to see people running into. And I'll use one obvious one, maybe one not so obvious one. So to use the obvious one first, Tyler, you mentioned, which is battery life, is really understanding what someone means when they market a battery life. Because I've seen a lot of marketing slicks on different vendors out there of X amount of years. And it's really important to understand your use case and how the device is configured for you and what the actual expectation of a battery life that you're going to have, because I have seen a huge disconnect there. I really want to see more vendors being much more transparent with, okay, if you're going to do it this way, then no, you're not going to get 7,000 years out of it. You're going to get, this many years out of it. And so I think we do a really good job of that. I know Link Labs does a really good job of that as well, as being transparent with capabilities and all that sort of stuff. The second really big thing, and this one I cannot stress enough, and this is a question that you should be asking, really anyone in the hardware space in general, but asset tracking especially, is what is the failure rate of your devices? We have seen so many situations, and I'm sure Jennifer and her team can attest to this as well, where we're not the first ones there. I'm actually replacing another solution that was implemented 6 months prior, 12 months prior, 24 months prior, whatever it is. And the reason we're replacing was not because the other device necessarily wasn't feature rich, is because the deployment was a bust because they had so many device failures at scale once they've deployed these units. So just asking the question, hey, based on all of y'all's company history, whether it's short or long, what is the expected failure rate of these devices? And they should be able to give you an answer. That's a very, very important question to ask. We have seen some crazy numbers in especially the battery powered space specifically, where failure rates can be between 10 and 20%. That's not acceptable if you're deploying 10 or 100 or 1,000 or 10,000. And so making sure that you're actually working with a vendor who has high quality manufacturing, that has very low failure rates, and actually has a track record to stand on is really, really important. So, hey, we didn't just come out with this device last month and it's our first device ever with no data. You could take that risk and maybe it works out phenomenal. I'm not going to be one that says it doesn't, but at least has several years at minimum of experience in building devices and deploying devices, and can point to very specific data with, forget all features and functionality. Those are very important, but at a very bare minimum, is this device actually going to last and work once I deploy it, which is the most critical thing. And the last thing I'll say, and I think Jennifer touched on this, but flexibility is really important. So what we see it seems like a daily basis is people change their minds. I would say that us as humans, we like to change our minds quite a bit on a lot of things. And we see that maybe 6 months ago, a customer of ours deployed a solution and it was pinging on movement, or maybe a couple times a day, whatever it may be, doesn't matter. But then 6 months later, they've realized, you know what, we actually need more out of this solution. Can we ramp this up? And can we change all this over the air, where we're not having to rip and replace devices? Or we'll see the exact opposite. Hey, we were a little, maybe a little overzealous. We don't nearly need this much tracking, and we'd rather have more battery life, or whatever the conversation may be. So having a solution that doesn't have to be set one time and can never be changed is really important. And also, even having a device that can be changed is a common thing that we see. It's like, here's what you get. There's no other options. Hope this works for you. In the asset tracking space, that just is not acceptable. We see every single use case seems to need something kind of unique to what they're trying to accomplish. And so the flexibility, failure rates, those are really big things, I would say.
Excellent. Well, those are great ones. And yeah, maybe one you're not thinking about, but that's a massively important one to ask. Daniel, I'll let you hop on this.
Yeah, sure. So Jennifer, yourself and Dallas gave a lot of good examples of the common pitfalls to avoid. Now, what advice would you give to a fleet manager regarding the successful integration of asset tracking technology into their existing operations and workflows?
Yeah, so I just wanted to circle on Dallas's point there too, because I think it flows into this. When you're looking at those pitfalls, it seems like a duh moment of that you can't change devices, but you really do need to work with a partner who understands what you're trying to do and why you're trying to solve what you're trying to solve, right? There's a lot of devices out there that are just, here's what you get, and you can go buy them on Amazon, right? They're not going to integrate with your Geotab, and they're not going to be commercially scalable, but there's a lot out there in that space. And so as you're thinking about what pitfalls to avoid, it kind of goes right into that advice of, okay, be careful, where you're going and what you're trying to do. Find a partner who's not just trying to sell you something, but who really wants to understand, what are your processes? What actually are you trying to solve? Right? You're not trying to solve asset tracking. You're trying to solve some problem that asset tracking will help you solve and get to that solution. But maybe it's theft and loss. Maybe it's too much retention. Maybe it's an underutilization and having too many assets, or not having the assets in the right space when I need them. What are you trying to solve? And then your partner can work with you to say, all right, what does that look like from an integration perspective? What does that mean for what my configurations need to look like? And how you put that into your operations. I think, as you think about, not just today, we touched on thinking about what that looks like tomorrow, what that scalability is going to need to be, and what those additional use cases are going to be. Find a partner who's going to help you today and be there for you tomorrow. I know you'd probably say the same thing, Dallas.
Yeah, of course. This is actually a challenging question to answer because deployment can have so many variations to it depending on what we need to do for a customer, because some have very simple needs and use cases and operations, and some very complex. So it can be so across the board of what's the best way to integrate this into what they're doing. I mean, obviously, Jennifer mentioned this. A good first start is getting a solution that integrates into Geotab. I'm assuming that most, if not all, people on this call are Geotab partners or customers. That's a good starting point. Of course, the technology needs to work within the Geotab ecosystem. And that's what we talk about a lot is this needs to be plug and play. You already have your fleet operations embedded in Geotab. You have all these different workflows that you're doing. It's very simple. There's several asset tracking partners in the Geotab Marketplace that are fully integrated with Geotab. One of those should fit your needs, and once it's in Geotab, it should really seamlessly work with what you're already trying to use Geotab for in your fleet management. And then there's all the unique things. Are we building custom integrations? Are we building custom tools? Are we doing custom parameter sets to make sure it fits the use case and kind of it easily deploys into their operations and workflows? And one thing that we actually did recently, I think was interesting because I'd never had it asked of us before, is the customer actually wanted kind of a custom install video very specifically for them to kind of fit their use case to help their field staff have less questions, which is kind of an obvious thing because, everyone's got their generic install videos and typically work for most folks. But just little things like that, if a partner is willing to take that one extra step to help you implement this, and by the way, installation, especially on a very spread out operation with multiple people installing and adding to Geotab and all these different things that can add complexities, just having like a simple 2-minute video that is specific to XYZ corporation, whoever the company is, can be a big value add that is really simple. And most people can do that sort of project to help someone deploy. So there's a lot of little things I would say, and everything Jennifer said is totally true. But I would maybe underpin it by just saying you have to work with someone with experience that's actually done deployments. They understand fleet operations. Because without those two things true, it's going to be very hard for you to seamlessly deploy with the help of a partner. So,
excellent. All right, with 15 minutes left, I'm going to go a little quicker. We're still good, but I just want to make sure we get a time as far as any questions on the back end. So if I can stick with you, Dallas, since you're chatting here, sir. So for many fleets, the most common need is around, again, trailer tracking. I understand there's numerous other types of cases that might be less known, less popular. Could you share a few examples of how these technologies have been helpful and, again, more creative? So just outside that usual box as you see of trailer tracking or whatnot, is there any other really kind of common things that customers are using these devices for?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say for us specifically, of course, we do lots of trailer tracking, but it is almost like increasingly less of our volume that we're doing with partners and customers. And I would say that there's been an evolution in the telematics space in general, and this would be a kind of a downstream result of that is people started with vehicles, then they moved to their most expensive stuff or their highest loss stuff, and they've kind of worked down their value chain of how much an asset may cost, right? And so we've seen all sorts of weird examples, I would say, in the last 24 months of, hey, can you guys do this weird little thing, whatever it may be, right? And when you get to that point, though, it's okay, how expensive is this asset? How painful is it when you lose it? Can you replace it easily? How often are you losing it? Like those are questions that need to be asked, of course. Is it even worthy of a full-blown asset tracker, or do you need to step down to a BLE, Bluetooth solution and understand the pros and cons of both of those from a cost to benefit perspective? But we get a lot of requests for, kind of the non-trailer, non-vehicle, and not even big equipment. So it could be small generators, could be like aero boards for people that are doing road construction. It could be handheld, expensive telemetry data for people that are doing like site work and surveying and all sorts of things. We've seen a weird, a weird wave of people wanting to track mobile ATMs. I mean, all sorts of things. People are getting creative of ways to track things. And those are the hard ones sometimes, or even there's a good one that we're working on currently is not even tracking like assets in the long term, but just tracking assets in transit. So we've had several customers come to us and say, hey, we're shipping our product. And what we're finding is that in many cases, that product is damaged when it actually arrives to our facility or the customer. And so they're wanting to understand things like high G-force impacts during the shipment to make sure that the third-party contractor that they're shipping through is actually handling their product appropriately. So like we get a lot of that sort of stuff where they don't even necessarily own the asset. They might have just created the product, manufactured the product, and they're shipping it to an end user or to a dealer or somewhere else. But they're wanting to have some sort of chain of custody in that shipment process to make sure their assets are arriving at a customer in new conditions. So I would say, look for problems in your business. Where are there holes in our process currently? You don't even have to own the piece of equipment to track it. We're doing more and more of those, or a lot of high value shipments. I mean, all sorts of fun things. I would say as a vendor, that's the most exciting thing about this space is every day I'm getting some new inquiry of, hey, have you ever tracked this before? And I'll be transparent. The answer is no, but let's try to figure this out together and see if it actually makes sense. So, pairing the right device with the right ping rate and capabilities is of course important, but there's almost nothing you can't track. I mean, it's pretty diverse.
And again, Jennifer, I'd love for sure your context because I feel like this is one of the things Link Labs for sure shines with, whether it's maybe even temperature monitoring I want to know high level, what's the tip there? Where you've got small little AirTag trackers, whether that's people I might be using it or on tools. I feel like there's a lot more creative things or not a lot more, but just some of the other examples I'd love to learn from you.
Yeah, so the thing about combining technologies, and that's what we do, like we combine several of these together, is that it really opens up a lot of creative ways to track the assets. So you can combine up to thousands of Bluetooth devices with a singular GPS cellular tracker or hub, and that opens up affordable ways to track all different kinds of assets. So from pallets for proof of delivery, or temp sensors on a passenger bus or a refrigerated vehicle, construction equipment around a yard or a construction site, medical equipment that's traveling with an ambulance, backup trackers for theft. We talk about that with the trucks or the vehicles. There's hundreds of creative use cases for asset tracking that we've seen just generate real ROI and efficiencies for our customers.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I think, again, it for sure just starts with the conversation, like each of you have said, that just customer or reseller chatting with you, this is the problem, this is the pain point. I saw in the chat there, again, coming to you guys with the KPIs that I want. This is what I need to measure. This is what I want to get. And then kind of problem solving that to find the right solution, the right technology that's going to work best is easiest. All right, let's see here. I've got two questions. Let's do, I'll just do each of you with one for time perspective here. And Jennifer, just with you talking and chatting here, as far as the future, when you look at, as the technology evolves, I'm just curious if you have anything, what do you see coming around that's maybe big? Again, wearables, I feel like is something I keep hearing about, employees wearing things because I want to make sure they're safe, they're okay. Is there any other technologies that are exciting you when you think about this in the future?
think there's more opening up with more combinations of technology, adding in ultra wideband to get the seamless indoor-outdoor experience, and being able to tell where something is within centimeters within a warehouse. I think we're also going to see a lot of evolving in how that data is used, right? And so you're being able to track these things now, but we're already seeing using that for predictive maintenance and how much something's been utilized. And so when do I need to do that next calibration or certification on it? And so, as companies are building out their AI strategies, asset tracking is opening up a ton of data. And so using that good, clean data to build the foundation of, how you can utilize that in the future, I think we're going to see a lot more uses of this data as that technology evolves.
Yeah, no, very interesting. Very interesting.
Thank you, Jennifer. So we're going to ask one more question. Dallas, this one's for you before we open up the Q&A. If you can offer one piece of advice to a business considering investing in asset trackers for their fleet, what would it be?
Yeah, to not mention anything we've already talked about, I would say is just look at the total cost of ownership of whatever solution you're evaluating. So don't just look at the monthly rate or just the purchase price and evaluate them all as equal. If you have one that's 50 cents less or 50 cents more, whatever it is what are you going to actually get out of this over a 5, 7, 10-year period? How often will I have to put a new device in this asset? Is there one that will last longer so I can actually buy less asset trackers in the long run? So it's just asking all these different questions, talking about all those use cases that we talked about. What is the total value that I'm going to get out of this? The total return I can get out of this one versus this one. So just getting away from looking at a proposal that shows 2 asset trackers that are likely not even the same, but have different costs, and just picking a lower cost option is just make sure you actually understand what you're getting for that money. And that's not to say that the more expensive one is better, because that's not necessarily true. But looking at it past the price of it and really understanding, is this extra investment? This one's more expensive. So is this extra investment going to get me more or not? Because that's an important thing to make. Or is this less cost one? Is it going to be the same thing or even give me what I need or even last past 6 months or 12 months, whatever it is? And so really taking a much more deep dive. And I would say along that same vein, take a set of questions, ask failure rate, ask all the questions, and then ask them consistently across different partners that you're evaluating to see what types of responses you get. And lean in towards the people that actually have expertise in the space, because they're the ones that are going to help you long term actually realize the value that they're talking about. Because anybody can talk is very cheap. Any marketing team can put together a slick marketing document, but what's the actual results? And do they have success stories? Can they talk about results? Those are very important things when making an investment like this, whether you have 10 assets or, again, 10,000, doesn't matter. So.
Excellent. Thank you. So we got a couple questions already in the chat. If there's anybody that's got any last minute questions you want to squeeze in, got about 7 minutes left on the call. We're going to answer as many as we can. And for anyone we don't, we'll work to get our answers from our panelists and then follow back up just to make sure we cover everything. So I had a first question here, and for either of you, question was, where is the best place to install a solar panel asset tracker on a tanker type of trailer, keeping in mind the best location for connectivity and from thieves not being able to see it?
Yeah, I can take it real quick if you want me to. I don't think we certainly don't do solar asset tracking. I'm not sure if Link Labs does or not, but I will say solar has the biggest limitations from a install perspective specifically. It is very hard to install a solar device that can be hidden because it needs, of course, solar exposure. So if that's an important piece of the asset tracking scenario, I would look at alternatives that are purely battery powered and not solar. But I've had quite a bit of experience in the past, and that's my best advice there.
Excellent. So another question here. We operate a fleet of boom trucks. They use PTOs to operate the equipment. How can we create saving and distinguishing idle time and idle PTO time?
I can also answer this if you want me to. So with any sort of PTO, you need a way to hook into that PTO. there's different ways to use auxiliaries to do so. You can even do this through a Geotab device if you have an IOX harness, an aux-M harness. If it's a hydraulic PTO, it gets a little more complicated. But as long as you're using Geotab and you have an asset tracker that can tie into that PTO, then you're able to distinguish when the auxiliary, aka the PTO, is actually turned on. And then you can evaluate PTO idle versus non-PTO idle, which of course is important. Just with idling, people care about wasteful idling, not operational idling specifically. And so from a device standpoint, you just need the ability to hook into that PTO as a first step. And then actually Geotab can solve the rest of that equation with rules and reporting as long as you're using Geotab.
Excellent. So one of the other questions, which is one I get constantly on anything marketplace related, is basically, hey, there's so many options on the marketplace. I would love a matrix or a grid that could help compare that. Does Geotab offer a matrix and walk through the capabilities of the different options, industries and assets and all they're best suited for? So we do have one. I will mention it's a touch outdated, so I will work to dust it off and share what we have right now. And it basically allows you to compare. I think we did this last fall. Was the comparison grid. So kind of walks through maybe a Philips Connect or Go Anywhere, Digital Matter, or some of the Link Lab solutions. You can kind of see again battery, this, that, the other. But with so many solutions and so many varying things, it's always dangerous to kind of freeze it in time in a matrix because things just change and there's so much context to it. So the biggest thing I would say, as we kind of chatted through today, I think it's worth just having a conversation with either the panelists today, looking on the marketplace itself, the materials that are there, the links, the videos, to really get an understanding, hey, what is this product used for versus this one, to help you guys choose. But I will at least get the matrix shared out, and we'll work to get it updated to make sure it is up to date with all of our current stuff. All right, let's see. Closing in on final minutes here. Another issue is mounting the device at a location that isn't obvious for thieves. We're using them on small off-road ATVs and snowmobiles, as well as large off-road equipment. So I guess it's curious, is there a way to really try to hide it? Where is the best spot? Underneath or...
I'll take that one. That's an advantage of battery-powered devices, is they're typically small and you can hide them in, underneath or places that thieves are not going to look for them. And so that's a big advantage of using small battery-powered devices, that aren't necessarily going to ping a lot until you have a theft event. And then if you can configure it to, if I leave this geofence, or if I that's disconnected from my vehicle, or it can start pinging more frequently. I've identified that there's a theft event. I can, hit it with a ping and have it start automatically updating. There's a lot of different ways to solve getting updates more frequently, but finding that hidden location is important when you're trying to prevent theft and loss.
Very helpful. All right, with that, I think that's about as most as I can squeeze in these last little bits here. If I can go back to my last slide. Honestly, just again, I want to thank everybody on this panel today. I want to leave with some next steps because we talked about a lot of information. And I think the most important thing you heard today, it's really a conversation you need to have with the right partner. So trying to just find this online, trying just to look at this, I think sometimes can be confusing, as we've heard. But having a kind of the needs analysis discovery session to me is super key. So a quick shout out to anything marketplace related. That marketplace CSMs at Geotab is my entire team of 8 channel sales managers. So whether it's cameras, safety, maintenance, review, you name it, shoot them our way. We'll help answer questions and support. Daniel, who's on the call today, again, manages both of these current partners. If you ever want to chat high level, meet Daniel, kind of go through, he's here. And then, of course, for both Dallas and Jennifer, email them. And then I'll have the links in this to their marketplace pages where you can see all the solutions, kind of get a better understanding there. And if you want to learn more or schedule kind of a meeting or a demo from there, you can request that. Say, hey, I want to learn more, and it'll kind of start the domino effect for us to help reach back out, set a call, and kind of do a full discovery with you, just so you can learn and make the right decision. Any closing thoughts, Jennifer or Dallas?
I'm good. I appreciate everybody joining today, and hopefully it was helpful to somebody. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to myself or Jennifer. I'm sure we can have much more specific conversations around use cases and more in-depth questions. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Excellent. Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks,
Appreciate it. Yep. Everybody, just have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much.